Perfect. All right. I think we are live across all platforms. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Wild and Precious Optimal Living radio show with me, your host, Dr. Sam McDonald, on today's segment of Brain Talk. It is Friday, June 19th. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in all across the world. Hopefully everybody's doing well. Hopefully we're all doing great. I'm really excited for today's show. We've got a really fantastic lineup, and as always, this show is brought to you by our practice, my wife and Ryan's practice, Wild and Precious Optimal Living. We are a family neurologically based chiropractic office located here in the beautiful Wheat Ridge, Colorado, and we work primarily with the chronic and complex cases of the planet. So if you're a parent who has a child who's struggling with things like ADD, ADHD, sensory processing, and you're really looking for answers, you're looking for solutions, you're looking for hope, and you're wanting a different approach, a non-pharmaceutical approach, then I invite you to give us a call and come explore what some of the amazing technologies, the amazing techniques and approaches that we can provide to you, your child, or your loved ones out there. I'm very, very excited to bring on our guest today. I'm not even going to do an open today because I just want to have as much time dedicated to talk to this amazing gentleman. He is literally one of my favorite people to talk to. Anytime I can get him on the phone. I haven't seen him in person in years, but I'd love to get to see him again in person soon. But he's literally one of the favorite people I love to talk to because, one, he's one of the smartest guys I've ever met. Two, he's got the biggest heart out of any person I know. And he's constantly giving. He's giving of his time, giving of his energy, his knowledge, everything. Anything he can do to help other people, he's willing to do it. And I love him for that. So without further ado, bringing on the great, the knowledgeable, powerful Dr. Damien Griswold. He is the owner and operator of Vita Paragon Chiropractic in Bedford, Texas. He is the co-founder and clinical director of photobiomodulation for Chevlight LLC and distributor for the Advanced Laser. He is the former associate professor of the Y-Files Functional Neurology Seminar with the late Dr. John D'Onofrio. He is the happy and loving husband to Harlan. He is a loving and tolerant daddy to the crazy 12-year-old daughter Maya, and the favorite child to Sarah Lou Griswold, my grouchy but loving mom. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Dr. Damien Griswold. Damien, welcome. Thank you for coming on.
Hello, Dr. McDonald. Can I call you Sam?
You call me Sam.
Thank you. Call me Damien. Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Hello. Welcome, Damien. Man, this is fun.
I'm still tingling after that introduction.
Oh, dude, you're the best.
I'm tear up over here.
We got to get you the whole works and get you lined up, man. So, thank you for coming on. I've been really excited for this one for the past couple of weeks because of a lot of things. Again, one, because I know of how all the cool information that's stored in your head, but also mainly to really talk about one, photobiomodulation, this laser that we use in our practice. Because man, we use this thing every stinking day in the practice, at home. I was doing it right before I left the house to come here. I mean, I didn't think we would use this thing that much, but good God, like this thing's it's so cool. It's so life changing. It's just kick ass. I love it. So we're gonna talk a lot about that. But let's talk about you. So introduce yourself to our audience. Give me a little about your background. How did you end up as a chiropractor? How did you end up with working in functional neurology and with Dr. D'Onofrio? And let's hear some of the background that stories people get to know you. Are you there?
Sammy, you're freezing up a little bit.
Yeah, that might be either one of us. So can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay. So I was just saying, can you give us a background on who you are? How did you end up as a chiropractor? And what led you to functional neurology? What led you to working with Dr. D'Onofrio? All those kind of things. For those in our radio audience, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties, the fun, wide world of dealing with Zoom and Wi-Fi and everything else. So as we're getting resituated here. Damon, can you hear me now?
Better.
There we go.
I moved everything really close to my router.
Perfect.
So,
all right. So hopefully we got that going.
So I think I heard the question, Sammy. How did I get into chiropractic and all that we do?
yeah, how'd you get into chiropractic and functional neurology, and how did you get to where you are now?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Sam?
Yep, loud and clear.
So probably the most exact answer is fear.
Fear.
I was driven by a little bit of fear because I was told I was going to be a daddy.
Yeah.
And I think you know what that feels like, right?
Absolutely. Fears are really
Absolutely. I was told I was going to be a daddy, and I was about 46 days from entering law school, and I was doing research on a healthcare case for a law firm in downtown Dallas. And I got so deep into the research that I started seeing some cracks. And I started fearing for that little baby to come. Now I was already slated to spend 3.5, 4 more years in the school, and I sat down and talked to my wife at the time, and I brought up these points, and I needed knowledge. And even though she really didn't understand what I was talking about, she said to me that I've never heard you talk with such passion about the law, and I think you should follow through with that. So I signed up for another 4-year journey, and I went digging for knowledge. I did a pro and con sheet as to whether I wanted to be an MD, a DO, or a DC, or a natural medical doctor. And it just always came back to chiropractic, just because, well, for many reasons, but I could think outside the box in that profession. You know, when we first entered school, we probably thought we were all going to graduate and do all the same things. Well, I realized shortly into chiropractic school that everybody was going to graduate with some skills that are similar. But each doctor had a choice to dig into where they wanted to dig in, as deep as they wanted to go down the rabbit hole of healing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, but
yeah. Yep. Yeah, that rabbit hole can lead you a lot of different places depending on, I guess, what you're drawn to and what your passions are. So, getting into school, you're following the chiropractic curriculum, which, for those out there, it's a pretty, we both graduated from Parker College of Chiropractic in Dallas, Texas, and the curriculum is fairly standardized in terms of you have your basic sciences, you have your physiology, your neurology, and your X-ray classes and those kind of things. And there are some neurology classes there, but what led you then deeper down the neurology rabbit hole?
Well, I would say I had met a doctor. His name was Dr. John D'Onofrio. You know him well as well. You know him well, and you did. And we both miss him. He passed away in 2017. And I became a rep for an organization that did board reviews, and I was funneled through to meet Dr. John D'Onofrio. And I was full of, again, fear and motivation, and I had to sit down with this big monster, this big healer, this gigantic heart in our profession, and have lunch with him. And it was kind of quiet. It was kind of a quiet lunch, because I was a little bit older in school, and Dr. D'Onofrio had been around for years and years and years, and I didn't understand who he was. And he was from Brooklyn, New York, and I was from Detroit, Michigan. And so I don't know if there's built-in skepticism from where we were raised, but we sat and we just had a little bit of small talk. And we both realized we were really lousy at small talk, so it became more quiet. And as I was sitting there, about every 7 minutes, some professor or even the president of the school wandered in to try to get his attention to discuss a personal matter with him as to how to treat something. Okay? Something for themselves, something for their child, something for their mom. I realized, the big light bulb came off. I realized that this guy had answers that everybody wanted on how to treat a human being. And I remember acting like a 4-year-old or feeling like a 4-year-old because the lunch was over. I shook his hand, and you remember how tall he was? He was like 6'4".
Yeah.
And I looked up at him and I said something like, "Hey, I need to know what you know." And I'll tell you, it was pretty selfish. I needed to know that for my daughter. I needed to know it for myself. And he had it. And he looked down at me and said in his Brooklyn accent, Because I asked him, how do I get that knowledge, right? He said, you follow me around the country and you come to every one of my white files for the next year. And that was it. And then he walked away, almost like dropping the mic. And that was a powerful moment. And I didn't even mention to him I was doing it. On my own dime, I started making reservations. And I would just show up at his white files without telling him. And by the second time around the country, there were 8 at the time, all around the country. But by the second time I showed up, we talked, he witnessed the pattern, he just started putting me to work. And I started listening, and I started my journey in something that I do, and I've done often. I started studying the brain of a great healer. I started getting into ins and outs, listening and reading, and almost being able to predict what his next sentence was going to be, because I needed that knowledge to protect that little baby, right? So, did that answer that question, or is that a little bit too much?
No.
Too much fluff?
No, it's fantastic. Like I said, for me, Dr. D'Onofrio was a huge inspiration. And I remember him walking into the beginning stages of my schooling. And at that point, and probably most of the audience out there, when we think chiropractic, we think bones, we think back pain, snap, crackle, pop, that kind of thing, and there's not a whole lot of substance to it. But I remember him walking into the classroom and immediately start talking about when you adjust somebody, you change somebody's brain every time you lay your hands on them, every time you adjust them, every time you do any of these things, you're changing somebody's brain. And that was my light bulb moment with him. And yeah, this guy from New York, and I'm just a kid from Tulsa, Oklahoma. What do I know about healing in the world? And listening to him talk about these things, and yeah, and even I had this similar experience having lunch with him and watching student after student and professor and all these people come in, hugging and shaking his hand, saying, thank you. Hey, my mom, she doesn't have cancer anymore. Hey, can you tell me about this? This person needs this help. And same thing. This guy has answers. This guy has knowledge. He's a doctor's doctor, as I think you described him that way.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So
Absolutely.
Very powerful man. Definitely very much missed. So now fast forward, you've been through his functional neurology models, you're now out of school. So describe for everybody your practice in Bedford, Texas. What kind of clients do you see? What have been some of those challenging cases that you applied this knowledge to? And what have been maybe some of the most rewarding outcomes?
Well, I have a tiny little clinic. Forgive me. I took a lot of advice from Dr. D when setting up my clinic, in that I refused to go the insurance route because I did not want to be dictated as to what I could do for somebody. I was taught by him to buy tools for that practice, and not a reminder, but it should be stated that you said earlier that you use that laser quite often. Well, that is not the most important tool in your practice, and you and I both know it. The most important tool in your practice is using, right? Exactly. So he taught me to buy things that are an extension of what I want to accomplish and share them with my practice, with not only my family at home and abroad, but the family that became my clinic. So that tiny little clinic opened up, and it opened up quietly with low overhead, and I just started seeing more difficult patients that other business paradigms couldn't handle. He said to me once, 80% of the people that come to see a chiropractor will just get better. Get better if you put your hands on them in an organized manner. 10% nothing will happen, and 10% will get worse. And that led me down the road to learning as much about that 20% as I could. And that was my business paradigm and my clinical paradigm. Therefore, I started getting all these referrals from other practitioners, not just chiropractors, to figure out certain things. And I'll tell you what, God put you in the perfect place, because I never would have had all those answers, or at least had a place to start, if it wasn't for Dr. D'Onofrio feeding my brain and conversation after conversation, leading all down to the easy answer that if you raise the voltage in somebody's body, boost their global immune system, hey, you have that body working with you, and it kind of makes our job a little bit easier.
Absolutely.
So that became my practice, a small little cute, quaint practice with great energy. And I was pretty blessed that at the time I didn't have to feed the family. I didn't have to. It frightened me, the idea of going out and marketing myself as a healer to try to get patients. So I sat calmly and referral after referral. I try to do good work. I try to care for people, and things grow when that happens, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So clinical, go ahead, Sam.
What have been some of those fun and rewarding cases that you've worked with?
Well, there's many of them, right? There's many of them. Fun. I was debating what stories I would tell you here. How far down the rabbit hole you want to go with our aspect of healing, right? I will tell you, even in school on a mission trip to the Dominican Republic, I remember not being able to speak the language and realizing that just English, Spanish, French, it is just one form of communication, right? Nonverbal communication is also vitally important. And I remember being on that mission trip, being early in school, not being very confident in my skills. I remember an older lady at a church came up and she wanted to get on my table, and I was going to treat her. And she laid down. I had her lay face down, and I remember taking out the deactivating tool that we used, right? And I remember removing subluxations and keeping my hands on this lady. And I remember spending time. Somebody pressured me and said, "You got to move it forward. You got to get to these people, turn them and burn them." And I didn't understand that. And after the amount of time required to give this lady some relief for what she was asking, because she was pointing at different areas, she got up and gave me a hug and left. And about 20 minutes later, as I was working on somebody else, this lady came back into the church, and she came up and she was asking for some attention, and the translator went over to her, a doctor farther along than me. And he called me over, and I started sweating like I had done something wrong. It was frightening. And so I walked up, and she was tearing up and crying, and she was moving her hand back and forth. And the translator looks at me and says she can feel her hand for the first time in years, whatever you did. Now, it turned out that she was the matriarch of that little village. And there were maybe 4 of us students and a doctor. And everybody in the pews, they were lined up in front of each table. But after she did that, something happened, and everybody from the other pews came over to where I was. And is this story bragging? I removed the subluxation and just cared for this lady. And I remember looking. I was very focused. But I remember looking up, and the crowd was building in front of these. But then I remember looking over at the other tables, and all the other chiropractors were just sitting on their tables waiting. They weren't working on anybody. That lit a fire. That lit a fire in my brain, in my hands, in my heart. How's that?
That's a good one. Yeah, there's always something magical on those mission trips. You can remove a lot of those barriers of the business and everything, and the healing aspect. You just step in, and that's all you're doing. And there's a lot of magic happens. It's really, really
absolutely
fun. All right, you touched on this earlier, so let's bring it back around now. You talked about voltage. Let's talk about that. What is voltage? What does that have to do with healing? Because this is going to be a concept for most of our audience they've never heard before. It's something that I've become familiar with. So let's talk about it. What is voltage? Why is it important to healing? go.
Excellent. So everybody, write down Dr. Jerry Tennant. Jerry with a J, Tennant with a T, Tennant. He's an MD and he's out of Grapevine, Texas, and he's been on the planet for a long time. Now, I mentioned earlier that I've made a habit of studying great doctors, and I have, and getting into their brains and bringing them on as consultants in my clinic. I believe you can only learn so much from a book, which is spectacular, but clinical experience is and being close to people that came before me, the brilliant minds. That is where I shine. I dig in. And Dr. Jerry Tennant, I started studying him, and he brought to my attention a big conversation that is in America that's not happening enough. And that healing, he wrote a book called Healing is Voltage. Healing is Voltage. And he puts together so many different paradigms of healing and wraps it into this book that is not a barn burner. It's not a page turner. It's something that you read a little at a time and absorb the knowledge. And what does it discuss? Let's define voltage for a moment. When I say raise the voltage, I can also say boost the immune system. Same thing. When I say raise the voltage, I can also equate it to changing the pH of an area from a chronic acidic area to more alkaline healing arena. I could loosely say that when you raise the voltage, you deflame an inflamed area, and I can absolutely say that when you raise the voltage, you bring blood and oxygen to an area. And I think you and I both know that Otto Warburg won that Nobel Prize very long time ago for proving that chronic disease cannot thrive in an oxygenated environment. That's what voltage is all about. The last example I'm going to make is if I were to kick that wall and break my toe, immediately the voltage would go down in that area, and I would feel the pain, and that's a sure sign. That's a sure sign I have a boo-boo, right? Right. Well, I would take something like the laser. I would let's not even talk about the laser. I would take forms of energy, electrons or photons, and I would raise the voltage in that area, right? As I raise the voltage in that area, I expedite the healing of that area, and I get relief. Thus the term voltage.
So for a human being, we're walking around. Are we walking around with a particular voltage? Like, what should that number be for people to know?
So each one of your cells has a particular voltage that is needed for it to replicate, go through its apoptosis in a healthy way, right? So what do we know? We know cells change over in your body all the time. Almost all you have different portions of your body that are on different calendars. I think most people have heard that you're a different person every 7 years because we age, correct? Right. And Guyton physiology clearly states that we start getting older at 26, 27, 28. Anybody above that age on this radio show knows that's when we stop feeling invincible, right? Now, why is that? That's for many reasons, but the main reason is because our systemic enzyme production our proteolytic systemic enzyme production gets cut in half. I'll tell you, if I fell down as much as our grandchild falls down, I'd be in the hospital, right? Our natural anti-inflammatories, the things that keep us from shrinking up over time, hardening our organs, all of that stuff. Remember, we're not supposed to be on the rock forever. There's a planned obsolescence, right? We just want to be around long enough and have a happy enough life where we decide sort of when it's time to go, and we leave happily. Thanks for the time here. I'm looking forward to whatever you're looking forward to, right? So there are many things. I think it's best not. I don't know what's best, but I think I like to steer the conversation more to, what takes away from the voltage of the human being, right? Yeah. Because exactly. Now to start that off, we talk a lot about T4, the thyroid, right? T4, T3. And what Jerry Tennant and others have taught me is that T2 is something we don't talk about often, and that's in charge of the voltage or the charge within every cell. Now, what takes away from a human being's voltage? Well, you must know how to ramp it up, and that's to get a hold of some energy. The best case scenario in that place is to take your shoes off, walk on a beach, taking the electrons from the earth, the photons from the sun, and taking those happy negative ions that are coming out the water, which are just atoms with extra electrons they want to give us. As a result, our global voltage begins to rise, and we feel good, right? What takes away from that? Well, most people on this radio show probably could finish these sentences. We don't go outside as much, do we? Our kids are growing up with some of our kids, not all of us, are growing up with the aversion to being outside and spending way more time inside with machines, and therefore they don't see the sun. They don't touch the earth as much. They're not moving as much, and we live in a world of toxins these days, right? Toxins take away from somebody's voltage. And when I was growing up, Alzheimer's and dementia was not a hot topic. Why is that? I was born before 1970. In the 70s and 80s, a lot of chemicals really hit the market. In the 90s and into the 2000s, more and more things were done in basements, on the internet, with games, right? All of those things that I mentioned there take away from the human being's voltage. If I can give one piece of advice, one simple thing to change is, and remember, nothing changes on a dime. I think the hardest place to activate some of the things that we learn on radio shows like this is bringing those ideas into the house and trying to change everybody in the house. Right? Nothing changes on a dime. So think about one thing that you can change slowly. So I would say that would be to avoid fluoride. Fluoride affects the thyroid. The thyroid's in charge of the voltage down deep in your cell. We don't have to get real deep into all of that. I would just ask everybody to follow that rabbit hole down and make it. You can't read it perfectly, but make a concentrated effort to stop it as much as you can. Did I answer that question, Tammy, or did I?
No, you definitely did. So let's pause on that note for just a second for some station identification. So we are KUHS, the Stream Denver. And again, this is the Wild and Precious Optimal Living Show, brought to you by Wild and Precious Optimal Living. Again, if you are a parent with a child who maybe is struggling with something like ADD or ADHD or a sensory processing issue, and you're looking for an alternative, you're looking for something outside of the medical paradigm, and I invite you to give us a call, check out our practice, and take a look at what we can have to offer in terms of our technology, our techniques, and our methods in order to be able to turn your child's health around and really address the underlying cause of what's happening. So again, we are live today with Dr. Damien Griswold of Shedlight LLC. Right now we're talking about voltage. We're talking about something probably people have never heard of, and this work of Dr. Jerry Tennant. And to me, what was one of the cool things, because I never really to me it's always really cool seeing the macro picture of things and like why certain things are there in existence. And one of the things he tied together for me was lightning, and talking about, well, where do these free electrons come from? And these lightning storms will come through, and that's actually what's taking these electrons and putting them into the soil or the earth. And that's how we can then walk barefoot and be able to take these back up into our body. To me, that was just always one of the cool things that we shared. And I was like, oh, that's really neat. Very cool. So beyond walking on the beach, I mean, we can walk barefoot on grass. Any kind of moving body of water, right? So we're in Colorado here, so mountains, streams, rivers, stuff like that, creeks, all those are good, right?
Oh, Colorado is a. I think you described it once to me as a health mecca.
Yeah.
There is something on every corner for everyone, right? And I want to say that there are many ways to raise the voltage, right? Nutrition raises voltage over a period of time. What you put in your body, obviously, it's over talked. I think by now, and I've never met a perfect person. You remember going to school? We went to school with a few perfect people, and then you went to lunch with them, right? And you realized they weren't all that perfect. Because there's always that quality of life meal, right? That quality of life. So we do the best we can. Probably the wisest thing that somebody said to me or one of the wisest things is, hey, try to keep your list of banes of bad things for you real tiny, and keep the list of good things that you need to very, very long. And then work from that. Now, we talked about voltage and raising the voltage. Now you and I, we oftentimes get sent human beings, whether it's a tiny little 3.5-year-old or a 96-year-old lady named Miss Dot, right? And everybody in between it. And they might have some pathology along the way or some problem they're hoping we can solve, right? And what do I know about all of that? I know that now I look at what's blocking the voltage from getting to certain areas. I do my diagnostic techniques neurologically to determine where to start. And then I use my tools to raise the voltage in those areas, not only locally, but remember globally as well. And I remove that interference so their bodies can heal. And that is the power of the charge, if you will, the voltage.
So let's get into the laser therapy and the tools that we're using, because this is the laser company you guys have now. It's obviously not the first laser you use. So how did you guys get started in this field? And how did you end up now owning a company? What pushed you to want to do that, to bring this new technology to the world?
Well, as you know, Dr. D'Onofrio was in a little bit of trouble there at the end, and he had in mind one doctor only, and that was Dr. Brandon Crawford, to substitute for him and possibly take over the Y-File seminar. And when he was going through that trouble at the end, he couldn't make a scheduled Y-File, and he asked Dr. Crawford, he asked Brandon if he'd like to do it. And Brandon said, yes, I'd absolutely like to do that. So Brandon became the marquee for Y-Files. And I wound up going to California with him because, of course, I understood the aspects of all the Y-Files, and I was his backup. And I realized that Brandon was one of those doctors that needed to be studied. And again, I was up close to his brain, and I started to listen, and I started to follow and ask questions. And at the time, to me, he was just a kid. He's probably your age, Sammy.
Oh, he's older than me, but not much.
But brilliant, yeah, he is. And so what happened was we bought our first lasers, both Brandon and myself, on belief and a little bit of dogma and a lot of marketing falsities, and kind of lost faith in the photobiomodulation aspect of what we did. And Brandon, he was given an opportunity to put together treatment plans and possibly open up clinics overseas when it came to neurochildhood behavioral disorders. Now, one of these Y-Files, because Dr. D'Onofrio passed away and Brandon took the reins, and at one of these Y-Files, Brandon discussed with me the tools that he would need overseas. And I dug in, and I did a lot of sweat equity, and I dressed in suits and acted like an adult, and we had meetings, and we're finally shuffled down the path to Andy Hewitson, another great human being on the earth, and he is the manufacturer of the Avant lathe. And that was the tool that we needed to do what we needed to do with these children. And so as a thank you for the sweat equity put in, Brandon decided, and of course I was there, to form a distribution company and on an educational platform. People needed to know how to use this tool, how to use it properly to help people. And so we formed that so that when the lasers were ordered for overseas, at least I would get a little financial kiss on each one. Right? But that turned into, because we were on that educational platform as it was, it turned into a pleasure because, as you know, I'm a small batch educator. I like to talk one-on-one or 1-on-10 in educating. Brandon, look at you. You're a big batch educator. You have a radio show and you're talking to the masses, right? Thank you. So that became the basis for Shed Light Laser, or Shed Light LLC. Is now we clinically guide, or our team clinically guides 260 some doctors globally, and about 104 families that just haven't studied what we study. And they have a loved one at home, whether it be a child or a mother, that has some sort of chronic or acute brain injury. And we've developed a really good clinical niche at bringing results into the home. Our main tool is energy. One of the tools within the umbrella of energy is the laser.
Wonderful. That's cool. Yeah. I've never heard the origin story of the company. I mean, like I said, we use this particular laser in our practice, and like I said at the beginning, it's something we use every single day. We use it with our kiddo when we're trying to get him to help sleep better. We're using it if we have digestive problems. We're using it if I need a quick pick-me-up in the afternoon before an afternoon shift. We're using it for that. Again, using it on all of our patients for the myriad of conditions that we see, whether it's again, chronic line problems or ADHD or autism or whatever it may be. We're using it on everybody. And something that is, I think, probably you guys are the only laser company that's talking about this, besides the voltage piece, that is the aspect of co-activating in terms of using this for a neurological perspective. So can you talk about that, what co-activation is, and really how you guys are using the laser on the brain specifically?
Absolutely. So co-activation is also a big conversation going on right now, and just much like voltage, but only unfortunately within small circles like this, right?
Right.
In small circles. It's our hope because we absolutely work on an integrated platform with OTs and MDs and DOs and PTs. I'm ramping up a doctor, and she's a neuro-ophthalmologist tomorrow, and she's really curious about voltage, and she bought a laser, and I'm looking forward to talking to her. Now, because we work on that integrated platform, and because it is well known that there are many different systems of healthcare in America, right? In America. And that's not necessarily always the truth globally. Things are more integrated because there are good ideas on either side, right? There is good sound information on either side. I think the human being, what they want most if something goes down in their lives is they want options. They want to know it all, right? They want to know so they can make an intelligent choice as to which direction they can go. That being said, it's our hope, it is our absolute hope that they're not theories anymore. some of this knowledge actually makes it into the ears of the people in charge of those systems that lack ideas like co-activation or photons or electrons or, I'm going a little bit too far, but you understand my point. So, so co-activation. Co-activation is something that's missing a lot in neurological rehab. And sometimes it's being done without even the knowledge of it being done. It's my job and it's your job, Dr. McDonald, to figure out, based on our education, as to what areas need that co-activation, right?
Right.
Because it's complicated. So when we diagnose and we figure out through functional means an area that is low in voltage, what can we do? Well, I always like to think about it as if it's not cut out of your body, that highway, that neurological highway is still there and it's still working, but it may have barricades, right? It may have barricades and it's not functioning properly. Well, it's my job, it's your job to remove that barricade. And so what can we do? We could raise the voltage in that arena. We could do it with let's say the shed light laser. But we can also, because there are many pathways up through that area, possibly, we can also possibly use vibration, which might be another neurological channel or pathway up through the same arena. Therefore, we have two things going at once, maybe even three. Maybe we have a TENS unit going on one side of the body. Maybe we have percussion going on that same side of the body, coming up through the spinal cord, through the brainstem, through the cerebellum, all the way to the cortex, reopening up that barricaded highway.
Absolutely.
Co-activation.
Co-activation. 101 right there. I love it. With the laser, so what really separates your guys, for our audience out there, what really separates the laser you guys have versus other ones out there? This price, I know, is one big portion of it. Too, for me, it's also portability. The thing is, as you call it, the fancy flashlight. The thing is so, I put it in my pocket and walk out in clinic with it. So what are some of the big distinguishing features of it that make it such a versatile, powerful tool?
Well, I want to first say that all photons work, right?
Right.
All photons work. But not all medical device companies are on the up and up. Okay, there's always, not always, there's sometimes a way to juke with the numbers and maybe feed you some information. Remember, I talked about our first laser we bought on belief.
Right.
We bought on belief because somebody said that was the laser to get. Maybe that was the laser to get at the time. The reason why we chose the Avant laser to back and educate people with, and why all these other human beings are doing the same thing is because I'm just going to free flow.
Sure.
Because it is new technology wrapped into a new package. First and foremost, new technology. It is not old technology wrapped into a shiny package built on a hard to get to a human website based on research that doesn't apply to it, and marketing. You remember what Dr. D used to say about you tell a lie over and over again, it becomes the truth? And sometimes I feel like the marketing companies, that's their main motive, right?
No, I think Mark Twain used to say, a lie can get halfway around the world before the truth can get its shoes laced.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we chose, I'll tell you, you don't necessarily, if you're out there and you're contemplating purchasing a laser, okay, what you need to look at is dollar for dollar what you're paying for power. That's first and foremost, okay? Number two, what you said, being supported and educated. What happens with that laser? And number three, as part of support, what happens if that laser, something happens to of that laser. It's going to cost you lots of money on the back end. Right? So we met Andy Hewitson, and he had made this laser. His wife is a functional neurologist in our country. And at the time, she had a laser and it broke. And she brought that to Andy. And she said, and I think they had first started dating. You know, Sammy, you know how we do when we first start dating, right? Oh. And she said, honey, my laser broke and I don't want to send it to Florida or send it out to pay a couple $1,000 to get it fixed. And Andy, a brilliant engineer, took it apart and he said, I can do a much better job. And that's probably not the important thing. You know what she said? She said, I believe in you. She said, I believe in you. And he started doing that, and she handed him a honey-do list as to what she wanted in that laser. And he put it together for her. And so I understand the versatility. Well, you and I already know what's best, right?
Absolutely.
And I'll tell you also, I first mentioned that probably the first thing you want to look at is dollar for dollar, because it comes down to, can I afford a laser, right? And just out of context, it might seem like a lot of money, but do some comparisons and you'll realize that it is very economical comparatively speaking. Andy was on a mission to be in one of the times of his mission is to try to make this as affordable as possible for many people as possible, and he's done that. He's doing that. So
absolutely. So you mentioned power. Is when it comes to lasers, is power? We need to take like the American mentality and just more power is better. And how important is frequency when it comes into using a laser? Because I know you guys in the laser you guys have that we have. You know, there's all these different presets that come in there for different spots, you know, on the body. So how important is frequency when it comes to that? And should I just basically come at this with a fire hose mentality?
So great question, because dose response is a huge conversation. And part of your education, that's easy. Dose response. Can I do too much? How many times do I hear that question? And then you have medical device companies. They're telling you that this is the perfect amount of power. This is the perfect amount of power in this machine. Therefore, you need this machine. A little applause, right? And you've got to be careful because the dose response, you're going to do damage down the line if you laser too much. Excellent. Therefore, you need this laser because it's the perfect amount of power. It's a big circular argument, isn't it? It's kind of trapped in a mouse cage. Fine. The rule is the more injured the tissue, the more photons it needs. Yes, you have to be sensible about using a laser. This isn't the most powerful laser out there. This is still a class 3B, but classes have very little to do with power. It has to do with eye risk, right? Eye risk. This laser, even if power is a question, you have the ability to ramp the power up and down and make your own choices as to how much power you need. I assure you, you need more power on a broken toe than you need on a pimple. So therefore, it requires less time to treat a pimple, right? Less time to treat a pimple. Now, energy has the ability to deliver information. Now, I want to tell you, the magic is found in the photons. The healing, the repair, nobody on the planet argues when using laser therapy properly, you can increase healing time by 45 to 55%. Nobody argues that. Why would you argue that? It's impossible to argue that, right? Now, that's in the photons. Photons are delivered through a wavelength of color. You can choose your color, red or infrared with this instrument, but you can go along the spectrum. And delivered on that energy is something called frequency. A mailman is just a mailman, but a mailman has the ability to deliver information. Remember that phrase? So that information is frequency. When in doubt, hit it with some photons, right? But you can do better. you can add a frequency to those photons that might resonate with the target tissue and make the healing journey just a little bit faster, a little bit better. Even there are frequency giants, rabbit holes for everybody to go down. Some people have heard of Royal Rife. Some people dig into Paul Nogier. These are guys that did a lot, and they capitalized on the works of other people as well. Just like Einstein built on Tesla, everything builds and builds and builds in the world of frequency. So that laser, I'll tell you, once to sum it up, and to get into frequency just for a little bit, I know time is waning here.
9 minutes.
Is 9 minutes. Is that energy has the ability to deliver information. The energy within a laser is photons like from the sun. That energy is delivered through a wavelength of color. Lots of research on all the wavelengths. This laser has red and infrared. Upon all of that is the ability to deliver a frequency. When going back to that broken toe scenario, I would grab that laser and I would turn it on. And I would probably turn it on infrared because I want the infrared has more of an affinity towards tissues. Those photons stay more local. And I want to light up that toe because I just broke it and I'm in pain. Might I choose a pain frequency to help expedite the relief? Absolutely. My daughter, who, as everybody knows from the introduction, is a little bit crazy and loving. When she gets a pimple on her forehead, she'll come in and turn that laser on red because it's better with surface and the photons travel all over the body. She'll turn it on skin. She'll laser that pimple for 30 seconds to a minute right on her forehead. And she doesn't care how she knows this. She doesn't care because she doesn't care what dad he knows at this point, right? And then all by herself, she'll switch it over to infrared. She'll laser her liver for a minute or two because she knows, she doesn't know how she knows, that usually when pimples are coming out on the face, there's a possibility your liver's congested too. By 4 hours later, doing that for 30 seconds on her forehead, that pimple's drying up. By Saturday, it's 50% gone. By Sunday, there's no more pimple. I was being daddy's chauffeur not long ago, and I had 3 12-year-old girls in the backseat talking, and the topic was pimples. And of course, I turned on the radio and I listened, and I was proud of my daughter, and I didn't say anything, but I heard her bringing up so nonchalantly how the laser helps out her pimples. And she described her own little technique with doing it. Here, back when I had to kind of force her to use it when she was 9, and my main worry was finding it in the covers all wrapped up or underneath the bed on. Here, this little 12-year-old has an opinion about photobiomodulation. I thought that was pretty spectacular.
What a brave new world, right?
Absolutely. And she only gets a little bit of it again. Yeah.
So I'm curious, I've always wondered this, playing with the red and infrared. I don't know how much you could share potential in future development, but is there applications for other colors in terms of violet or green or other things like that for laser therapy? Because I've only seen red or infrared on lasers and heard of violet, but never seen.
Absolutely. So Andy's coming out with some different colors in the future, and there's wonderful research on all wavelengths of color. It's wavelengths of color. A lot of that research comes out of other countries. You know, the Russian illumination technique. Russia did a lot of research. You remember photobiomodulation has been studied since the 60s. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of research articles out there. You can go to WebMD or anywhere and just start reading about. Just type in photobiomodulation, what you want to know about, and then know this while you're reading. You know, research. there's an art to reading research. You got to you have to read beyond the soundbite, right? But you don't have to spend all day doing it. You have to ask yourself, is this research done within a body, in vivo, or is it done in vitro in a petri dish? That's the first question. Now, it's also good knowledge, but you got to take it with a grain of salt if you see that in vitro outside the body research article, right? And then you could follow it down. There's a lot of talk right now, even in the mainstream, with the COVID crisis that's going around, about ultraviolet, right? Ultraviolet knocks out I don't want to make any claims here,
sure,
but different wavelengths of color are better at knocking back bacterial, viral, fungal loads and much more. But probably what should be listened to is all of those wavelengths have blended healing properties. Red is just a little bit better than infrared at knocking back bacterial, viral, and fungal loads. Just a little tiny bit, but they both do it, right?
Right.
So there's a lot. So I hope that answers your question, Sammy. I'm very excited because photobiomodulation, whatever they're calling it, ultraviolet light is photobiomodulation. All photons work. If this crisis that we're going through right now leads to the mainstream market talking about photons, I'm going to be really happy no matter what wavelength of color they're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I've already seen I think it was Sharper Images already advertising handheld ultraviolet lights to disinfect surfaces and those kind of things. And I've already seen that through a couple of places. That's going to be the next big wave is light disinfecting. It's already in water filtration systems, so it's natural now that it's going to emerge and come out to handheld devices or whatever else.
Absolutely. And I wanted the final notes because we have 3 minutes. I was reading it. The other night I was reading about Royal Wife, and as a reminder to everybody out there, Royal Wife, he turned out through a course of his life to, in the end, be pretty much of a mess. But the journey of his life and what led him down to making different choices later in his life, you start from the beginning. And so I started from the beginning, and we talked about, or I was reading about the beam ray. It was a device that he created to deliver frequencies, the resonant frequencies of different things like bacteria and virus. I think a lot of people have heard or have read about the opera singer and the champagne glass shattering, right? You hit a certain tone, you hit the resonant frequency of something, and there's a possibility that it will explode. And Royal Rife proved this way back when with viruses and bacteria. The thing is, what he did, his tool, the beam ray, the way he delivered those frequencies was a lamp. It was a lamp. It was photon. That's pretty powerful, huh?
Yeah, super powerful.
He used the frequency and raised the voltage. Nice.
It is. And for those of you that have not heard of this gentleman, so Royal Rife was an MD. We got 1 minute left, so we can't go into detail about it. I'm reading the book right now, actually. The book's called The Cancer Cure That Worked. So worth investigating and checking out the Rife and the Rife technology. And even the whole beginning of it, the medical conspiracies and cover-ups and research and all that, it's fascinating about how things were purposely driven in a different direction. So we got 1 minute left, Damien. What can you leave our audience with? What else would you like to share? There's a bunch of stuff we didn't even get to that I wish we did. But parting thoughts. What would you like to leave us with?
Well, I guess I would say that if you're out there and you're searching for a healthcare provider, okay, I don't know why I'm going down this route. I'm looking at you and I see a healer. That's what I see. I see a healer. I don't see a businessman. I don't see a radio show host. I see a healer. You're on the planet long enough, you start to pick out who's a businessman, who can go in, and as opposed to who might be a businessman and a healer. I see the love language of service in your eyes, Dr. McDonald, and I appreciate you having me on here. Maybe that's my last sentiment. Look for that healer. You have one in Dr. McDonald right there.
Thank you very much. So if people are interested in learning more about Shed Light or more about the laser, how can they get a hold of you guys? How can they find out more?
Absolutely. Just Facebook, look for Shed Light Laser public page. shedlightllc@gmail.com. Send an email. You can find Brandon Crawford. He's fancy with that social media about Shed Light. I don't even know what hashtag means, right? So you have all kinds of avenues. Google Shed Light Laser. That will lead you down a rabbit hole. Good enough?
Perfect. Fantastic. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Wild and Precious Off the Wooded podcast. We really hope you enjoyed today's discussion. I know I certainly did. So we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. And actually next week, Dr. Lynn's going to be on the radio next week. I'm not sure what she's going to be talking about, but I know it's always good. So until next time, again, we want to close you out with the question, what is it that you want with your one wild and precious life?